Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks very much for attending.
Welcome, a lot of familiar faces and friends.
Yeah, I see
Today's
Klaus, I see Susan.
Today's webinar is going to be led by Joe Vallone and Dr. Steve Maynor. We're very excited. Yes, this will be recorded. And yes, you will get an access to the recording after the webinar. So with a lot of amazing new content in place, without any further ado, I'm going to toss it over to Joe.
Thanks very much, Dima. And go ahead and start sharing the slides here. Just make sure everybody can see what's doing. Hopefully those slides are loud and clear for you. Everybody can see that okay? And hopefully it is advancing for you. If I just do a quick test here.
Looks
Excellent.
good.
All right. Then let's go ahead and get started, folks. So welcome everyone to the webinar. My name is Joe Vallone, and I'm the Chief AI Officer here at Outcomes 360. With me today is my friend, former colleague at Scaled Agile, Dr. Steve Maynor. Steve, welcome.
Joe, thanks for having me, and to all the Outcomes 360 teams. Great to see you guys.
Thank you very much, sir. You want to give a little intro on yourself, just a little background before we get started?
Yeah, sure. For those that haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Dr. Steve Maynor. I'm a VP of Framework and Methodologist at Scaled Agile. Been with the company almost 10 years now. For the last 4+ years, my focus on our team has been in the research and development on the intersection of AI and our SAFe framework. It's now expanded to, as some folks know, we're going even deeper into more offerings around AI. So AI has been kind of where I've been living and breathing for almost 5 years now. So I'm excited to share what we're learning and still learning in that process with all you folks today.
And real briefly, as I mentioned, I'm Joe Vallone. I was former also methodologist with Steve on the framework team at Scaled Agile. Now leading Outcomes 360 with two of my partners, Dima Dajani and Jim Fowler. And I am currently working on my doctorate in artificial intelligence. And so I've been doing also a lot of research around this degree. It's at Purdue University. So I'm really excited to share with you today some of the research that I've gathered and a lot of the collaboration that has taken place between myself and Steve. So why are we having this conversation? Or, you know, the kind of Simon Sinek why? What's the why behind this? Well, there's a transformative shift going on in the ecosystem as we know it today. Economic shift, both from a macro and a micro perspective. There is a shift going on in technology. Some call it transformative, some call it tectonic. Whatever adjective you want to describe or adverb, this is an important milestone to me. And I know I'm really dating myself here, but to me, this transformative shift feels very much like the advent of the personal computer, when all of that came into the home, and oh my gosh, what's this going to mean? And what's going to happen to jobs? And people are able to do stuff in a more easy fashion now. And then the advent of the internet, right? Those were powerful changes to our economy, and they required a lot of forethought and strategy. There's also a lot of executive pressure going on right now. What are you doing with AI? Are we getting the efficiency gains out of it? What's our ROI? Are we making anything with this? What are we doing, or is it just a fun tool to play with? We'd like to present to you today more of a balanced approach of how to attain this and kind of get your mind wrapped around this new way to lead this AI initiative. So behind the why are these 5 challenges that each AI leader is facing. So the big one, and this is what we mean by a balanced approach, but the big one is the lack of strategic alignment. More often than not, we're finding out that the investigations into AI, the experiments, if you will, those things are not aligned with the corporate strategy or with the strategy that you had. Now, remember, a lot of enterprises in the beginning of the year, they tout their strategy and how they're going to make money and, you know, what we put into, you know, 25 cents of every dollar in R&D and et cetera, and et cetera. Those types of things, are they part of your strategy? Do they match with the economic decision-making that you've made in the beginning of the year and your plans, and are you adapting to those? We know about the talents and fluency gaps. We know about that, right? We need to gain the knowledge, but there's also big talent gaps. If you don't have people that are very adept at LLMs, you're not going to be building an LLM. You're probably going to be using, and there's some commodity risks associated with that. The financial blind spots. Well, if it's not matching with the strategy, are we necessarily getting the ROI that we thought we would? How do we fund these things iteratively in a lean and agile manner? And once we have those pilots, what are we doing with them? Can we scale? Does it make sense to do that? Or are we building something and we're vibe coding it in a very, very small segment? And then Dr. Steve is going to go through and talk a little bit more about ethics, risks, and governance. That the governance aspect has really opened up around this, and there are a lot of moral, ethical governance considerations when we're working with AI. So I'm going to kick this off real quick with a poll, and I'd like to go ahead and make sure that you guys are able to see this. So give me a second. We'll launch this poll. Let me know if you're able to see this. There it comes. Should be right about now. So where would you guys describe your current place in terms of strategy in your organization? Now, if you're a consultant, perhaps you could answer this from the standpoint of an organization that you're working with and your own observations. Interesting. Are you guys able to see the responses? So this is updated in real time as people are looking at it. So far there's 10 responses. A few more coming in. Steve, what do you think about, are you able to see the results there, buddy? What do you think about what's going on? No, can't see them yet?
No, they're not showing up in my view.
Okay.
So give
You can
me the headline.
They're in the chat, Steve. You gotta
In the
look
chat.
at the meeting chat.
Oh, in chat. My chat window was closed. Shazam, there we go. Not too surprising.
Yeah.
As some of the audience may know, we did a big state of safe survey last year, and we had a section on AI with very similar stratification of the question, and the distribution is pretty consistent.
Yeah. One might think we already anticipated that result, Steve, when we were building this presentation out. So yeah. So the big one, well over 50%, was experimenting but not aligned. Yeah, we're seeing that all over the place. And also not surprising, we have a clear, well-communicated AI strategy. Cool. So good feedback on that. Why is this AI different from past tech waves, okay, or even past AI waves? In the history of AI, and so I'm going back to the Alan Turing, 1940s, late 1940s, 1950s timeframe, and there's always been this sort of ebb and flow. I mean, you could track it as a curve, like a sine wave, in the sense that there's always been this hype cycle, and then it's a drop off, and then another hype cycle and a drop off. The last big one being in the 2010, 2011 time frame. But here's the difference from the past tech waves. The root cause of the failure of the hype previously is well documented, and that had to do with the hardware. We were always butting up against the software was eating the world, and it would butt up against the hardware, and we would reach our limitations. That's not happening anymore. The advancements that is coming out of chip technology in places like NVIDIA, which seems to be in a catbird seat, both in terms of AI and crypto mining and things like that, we haven't taxed their chips to full. The other thing is, this is adaptive and generative. We have shown it to you, and it's available to the masses, right? Anybody with a computer and an internet connection can fire up AI right now and get value out of it. So it's adaptive, it's generative, it's different than what we've done in the past. Excuse me. And as I said, with that change comes new governance needs and a mindset shift to go along with that. It's also very important when you're trying to align this with your strategy, when you're trying to answer the questions from a leadership perspective, it's a good idea to know what AI can do and how it can help you and what it can't do. It is excellent at recognizing patterns, okay? You will hear the term, or if you haven't, you should hear the term. LLMs don't think, okay? They don't reason. LLMs narrate reasoning. What I mean by that is they're not cognitively thinking of the next word or the next thing to say. They're identifying patterns, and they're using probabilities to predict what the next word is going to be or the next thing they're going to say. This is why LLMs are bad at math. They don't deduce things. Okay, that's not what they do. They say the probability of 2 plus 2 is equal to X, right? So the probability of 2 plus 2, the probability is that it's going to equal 4. And you can pretty much bet the farm on them, right? But other types of things it can't do. It's great at generating content. We know that. We see that every day. New content tools are coming out all the time. It's great at summarizing meetings, especially meetings like this, right? Where we can just feed it in and get some ideas. Hey, what's the AI say? What are the top action items? It's great at giving you options, recommending. Things it can't do, it can't understand context. It's not human. It doesn't have those logic rules in there, believe it or not. It's more about probability and predictability. It can't apply human judgment. So there's nothing around there with morals and governance. It's not going to govern itself. Contrary to popular belief from big tech, AI is not going to govern itself. And it can't lead teams. Can't replace a human. It can't replace you, right? I'm not even sure how I feel about non-human people in cars driving me around. So there's that. All right, Steve, let me kick it over to you for a bit.
So, one of the things we're going to delve into a little bit deeper as we go through the rest of the webinar is, Joe's done a great job sort of laying out the current state and what some of the challenges are. The poll we just did reflect that these challenges are not unique. They're widespread. They're inherent to the nature of the emergence of this new technology. So who has the responsibility inside of an organization to help an organization navigate these challenges and make decisions on what the right moves to make are? Well, of course, that's leadership at whatever level, however deep you want to define what leadership is. As we continue to constantly research and understand some of these adoption patterns, just like the poll recommended, like answer the question, why are we not aligned, right? Why is the strategy unclear? Well, what we're finding in our own research, and you'll see this repeated in papers published by research published by the big consulting houses, BCG, McKinsey, et cetera, by Gartner. There's some common things that keep appearing in terms of the leadership challenge. There are some common misconceptions that the research is showing that leaders often have that may explain some of these patterns. The first one is AI equals automation. What I mean by that is they haven't completely understood why and how AI as a technology is different than technologies they've been exposed to and have been responsible for a majority of their career. They just kind of haven't made the mental shift or fully understand that generative, nature, the unpredictable nature of what AI is going to produce as compared to, an ERP or core systems that they have. So some of that has to do, they just don't get it yet. Some of it is they just think, it's just another commodity thing to go buy. Well, just go buy me some AI and plug it in, and it'll be like all the other technology investments. It does a thing, but it's not something that I have to, really understand the impact of its uniqueness, right? It's going to deliver value in almost every case, only to the extent that it can integrate with legacy systems and sources of data. That's not easy. It only works to the extent that we understand the ongoing operational commitment and effort that has to be put in to maintain it and tune it and refine it. There's a level of ops there that they don't completely understand. The third one is, just a desire, whether it's because of FOMO or pressure or whatever the case may be, to get moving and create a bunch of pilots, but not really take the time to reason through what pilots should we be doing and how do those things align to strategy? What's our hypothesis of what the return on investment is going to be? How will we measure that? There's not a, there's not a thought process like that. If we can go to the next slide, Joe. And what what's interesting about this is it's almost as if the mindset is that forming an AI strategy is some different thing than the business acumen that hopefully they have been applying, for their entire career. That's why they're in the leadership positions that they're in. And what we try to constantly promote in our work with leaders is to say, don't make this, a bolt-on as one of the slide points. It's not a bolt-on. Your strategy is your strategy. AI is simply another tool you have in your toolbox now that you didn't have previously, that gives you options in formulating your strategy that you didn't have before, but it's not a separate thing. So, getting the mental sequencing correct in understanding the role that it plays and not making it something separate. And say if we talk about, in our strategy formulation illustration and the quote from Michael Porter there, it's just another one of those inputs, right? We have lots of inputs that we use when we formulate strategy in a business. Now we have a new input. We have a capability, and we have to understand the reality of what that capability is, and not go to the bleeding edge, but the things that are proven and tested and tried and dependable in the land of AI. Yes, we need to understand what those are. That becomes an input of possibility, but then we have to formulate strategy as we always would have. And that's an important mindset shift that we need leaders to be sure and adopt. Next slide. And I think this one is mine too, Joe. Is this 9? I don't see the slide number, so my apologies. All right, I'm thinking yes, so I'm going to run with it. Stop me if it's not. So here's
Sorry,
the-
Steve, I was on mute. That is your slide.
Okay, thanks. Didn't want to step on your thoughts here. So what's the solution? So these are some of the things that we often use in bringing into the conversations with executives. Number one, when you're having this AI conversation in your organization, focus on the outcomes, not the tools. Too often it's, well, what LLM should we be using? Are we going to build our own RAG system? Well, what about agents? I'm hearing about agents now. Should we be shifting and this is funny, moving away from AI to agents? Well, that's kind of funny because that means that clearly don't understand the technology quite yet. So that's a conversation you eventually need to have. It's not the first conversation. The first conversation is what's the outcome we believe we can achieve if we use some of these technologies versus some of the alternatives that would not involve those technologies. So that's where the conversation really should start. What's the value we can deliver? What competitive advantage can we achieve? What operational efficiency can we achieve? What cost savings can we achieve? The typical business questions, not questions about tool selection. That will come in the right step, not the first step. When we, of course, being from Scaled Agile, there are some things that we've built into a lean and agile way of thinking and working for an organization that we reflect in the principles that we can also be very helpful and inform this conversation. Things like customer centricity. What's the customer experience going to be like if we take this AI path? Is that what our customers, is that going to delight them? Is that going to increase demand? Is that going to drive higher revenue? Think from the perspective of the customer and the value creation in the market that we're going to create. It needs to have some substance to it and not just hype. And then how are we going to measure that? Right? What are the metrics? What are the leading indicators if we take a lean thinking approach? And then what are the KPIs? What are the metrics we're going to determine to decide, did this investment provide the benefit that we expected that it would when we made the decision to make this investment in the first place? Those are the kinds of conversations we need leaders to have, and not get so infatuated with the technology and all of the, sometimes magic-like capabilities that AI seems to have, that we can get distracted on. No, let's take this back to first principles in the business acumen that put us in our positions of leadership in the first place. Joe, I think it's back to you.
All right. So launching our second poll here. Give it a second to pop up. But what is your biggest concern about adopting AI? What do you fear? What keeps you up at night? Hopefully that thing is popping up on your screen.
It is in chat.
Excellent. Yeah. Interesting, Steve. So far, got 9
Also-
responses out of 30, but governance, compliance.
Yeah. Also not surprising.
Yeah, really isn't. AI eating jobs. Well, yes and no, Josh. Some jobs. I mean, you can't not do that. But I think in some cases, maybe people have jumped the gun a little bit. And they're finding out now that there's the promise and then there's the reality. And very often those things don't align. All right. So we got a clear winner on that one about governance and compliance risk. Second place is lack of technical understanding. Also, another not surprising. All right, cool. So let's move on. Sorry, may have jumped the gun there. Here's a couple of studies. These are recent. These came out of the Wall Street Journal, so you can feel free to look those up publicly. Johnson & Johnson, probably heard of them, pretty large enterprise. They had close to 1,000 different use cases that they were testing out. So there were also the experimentation shotgun approach. What they found was that the 80-20 rule still holds. They were only getting 80% of their value from about 10 to 15% of the work that was emerging out of there. So really, out of all the experiments, only a small percentage, a 1 in 10 ratio of things that actually brought them real value. And so they made a strategic pivot, and they said, look, we're going to focus only in these specific areas. We're looking at drug discovery and what we can do with research institutions like Purdue and other academic institutions. They're doing work in these types of areas like cancer cells and molecular adjustments and things like that at a nanobot level. Sales, those types of things, customer service, and a governance shift, right? So they moved from, well, let's have this thing all essentially adopted to, it's not really going to work, right? Because the people that are working on, drug discovery is a completely different area than those that are working on supply chain. And so you can't have a single governance board when they're looking at very dramatic differentiation there. So Johnson & Johnson was a big one that popped up. Feel free to, the link is there. Feel free to look at the articles or just do a Google search on it, or better yet, Perplexity search on it. Companies are struggling to drive a return on AI. Also not a surprise. And so again, another Wall Street Journal article around companies and the surveys that they've done there. And they found out that, a little less than 80%. So high adoption rates for the companies that they surveyed. So everybody's playing with it in some way, shape, or form. Cost savings, haven't hit that yet. Revenue growth, not that they can attribute directly to AI yet. And then the private investment, though, is continuing to surge. It's not dropping off. If you watch CNBC, all they talk about is the massive amount of financial investment and funding of AI. And so they're still going full bore ahead, even if they aren't realizing the immediate ROI. But I think as leaders, we can do better. I think we can figure out, what are those areas that are really going to give us a return? And we can base that off of leading indicators, and we can base that off of incremental financing of the way that things are going. There are techniques to be able to do that from a leadership perspective, like real options and things like that. So what's working? We've talked a little bit about, the previous case studies and what we learned from that, but what is working? Well, first of all, target your outcomes before selecting your models. All right. So the models aren't all, we talk about in our course, we talk about not just a course, but in several of our courses, we talk about, what LLMs are kind of best for the things that they're working on. And so figure out what you want. Break that into smaller units, right? And these smaller sections, these atomic units, or if you want to consider them as features, or if you want to consider them a collection of features that's an MVP for what you're working on, that's fine. But what you're really looking for is you're looking at these fast feedback things. If you're using AI to do your development work, or you're using AI to maybe help with documentation or something like that, those are real things that we can get feedback on incredibly fast and know if we're heading in the right direction or not. So you focus on the leadership of that, you focus on the integration, and you focus on sharing that information. Putting yourself in small silos and not distributing the knowledge, the learning, is not going to get you there. Real quick case study, 1-800-ACCOUNTANT. What did they find out? They found out a great purpose for AI agents was as customer call bots. And actually, a lot of companies have been adopting this. It's a very specific area. It fits right within the wheelhouse of agency. It falls right within the wheelhouse of voice and activation. So it's a perfect technology for that area. And a lot of companies have been using AI voice agents to handle a lot of their customer support, and they've been getting some pretty good results out of that as well. I think this one, do we go back to you here, Steve? Or nope? Yep, it is. That is yours.
All right. So continuing the pattern of focusing now on what do we, given all the challenges and understanding of the problem or the opportunity, what's the path forward? What are some of the things that a leader should think about doing? Because remember that what we're trying to drive is an organizational AI first and a competency in AI, not just a tactical pockets of AI through the organization. The real return is going to happen when we advance as a company. So here are some very specific things. Use the tools you have. If you happen to be an organization that's adopted some type of lean, agile way of working, and you've got tools at the team, at the team of teams, at the portfolio level to think about how you align execution and strategy in SAFe. If you happen to be using our guidance there, we talk about strategic themes as a tool that translates a strategy of the business into how is that going to be reflected in decisions made about where our product is going. It's a great tool to use. And if you're going to adopt AI strategically, if you've thought through the use cases, if you've made some of those choices like Johnson & Johnson did, how do you translate that to the organization that has to actually execute on those decisions and build that capability? Strategic teams are a great way. OKRs, if you use those, use the tools you already have. You don't have to invent something new just because AI as a technology is new. I think other things like lean startup thinking. Right? This is very much an empirical playing field here. Right? We have hypotheses about what the technology could do in terms of business results, business value. Treat it like that, right? And use the lean startup thinking. Build, test, evaluate, run the cycle again. Plan, do, check, adjust. Psychological safety. People need to know that, this brave new world, that it's okay to experiment. It's okay to learn. So one of the things we encourage leaders to do is, work with your governance, work with your IT, create and sanction tools inside the environment and unleash your workforce to use those to upskill and explore the possibilities of what the technology could do. You need the whole workforce working on this, not just a small group of smart people who are making all those decisions. And you have to show that it's safe. One of the best ways to do that, we say to leaders, is you yourself use the technology, right? Share with the organization what you're learning, what you're doing, things that have helped you as a leader using this technology, and that's great permission giving. And then enable flow and feedback, just remove any barriers. Like, I get it. The compliance issues, the poll just showed, governance and compliance, regulatory environments, it's not something to dismiss, but it is something that can be worked. It may take some time and effort and investment, put the right people on the problem, figure out what you need to do from a policy perspective, from a practices perspective, from a technological guardrails perspective to protect the company. You need to do that. But once you've done that, then unlock and unleash and remove the barriers for the workforce to be able to engage and find how value can be created through the use of the technology. You want to democratize that to the greatest extent you possibly can. Next slide. So what the role of leadership then becomes, right? Leaders demonstrate that mindset that I just mentioned. Be curious, apply systems thinking, lower the barriers, create the alignment and clarity. We talked and used David Marquet's work in our own framework, talking about the need for creating technical competence and organizational clarity to unlock decentralized decision making. That's the role of the leader. You need to provide that clarity. You need to provide the technical competence through training, upskilling, creating the environment, and then provide that that safe space for experimentation and learning. Celebrate the positive things. In our own organization, we've added a periodic all hands kind of thing where one of the spotlight parts of the agenda is for people in the organization to bring to the whole company how they're using AI to make a real impact on their workflow. And they demonstrate it, and they share, before and after metric results. And that, and we celebrate that, and we spotlight that, and we share that so others can perhaps benefit from that capability as well. So that's one of the kinds of things that you can do to create that psychological safety. Next slide. Think about readiness across the organization. I think one of the early patterns, you'll see this in Gartner a lot if you look at the research of the last 2 or 3 years that they do, that a very typical pattern is, there's some kind of task force or some kind of special group that is given the responsibility to run off and figure out this AI thing. And it can get very siloed very quickly. Once you get past that stage as quickly as you possibly can, and make this a cross-functional, all of organizational mission to figure out how do we become an AI first company. It does require the governance, the IT support, because as we're going to talk about in a few slides, the governance and the risk management is real. But that's the challenge of leadership, is to do those hard things so that you can unlock the value. Value stream integration. Thinking again, if you're thinking in value streams, whether it's through SAFe or any other model, how are you going to integrate this into the value stream? What do your teams and teams of teams need to look like if you are becoming an AI first company? What skill sets do you need? How are you going to organize people? There are some new roles. There are some new functions when you embrace AI that you didn't have before. You need to figure that out and how that integrates into your pattern of flow of value from concept to cash. Leadership priority, making sure that the organization knows where this is in terms of the importance of the future of the organization, and again, modeling that. Data readiness is a huge thing. AI depends on great data, not just the data that the model is trained in. That's a great start, but if you only have that, you're going to be extremely handcuffed in what value the AI can deliver. It needs context. It needs data. It needs to have access internally to truly unlock market differentiating capabilities. You need to create the ability to do that safely. But sometimes your data is not ready for that. If you've been sloppy in how you manage your data, you're going to struggle with your AI implementation. So understand, even though data doesn't have the shiny, sexy, sparkly neon headline effect in the market, if you've got bad data, you're going to get bad AI. So just keep that in mind. Human-centered design. Just make sure that the star of the show needs to be what the technology does for the human, not what the human does for the technology. So make sure you keep that in the right order, no matter what it is you're doing. And I think at this point, I'm tossing it back to you, Joe.
Yes, sir. Hey, Steve, great points on the data side of things. I'm also going to drive that home a little later, but here's a tip for you. If you're consulting with an AI company and you ask them what their data strategy is, and you get a blank stare, they're not ready for AI, okay? Data is the gold that AI depends on, right? You can't get anything from AI without the data. That's what it uses. That's what it uses to train. So if your data is faulty, if your data is bad, Guess what kind of results that the AI is going to yield, right? If it doesn't know the answer, it's going to hallucinate. You run the risk of injecting bias. Those are things we don't want and companies can't afford. So make sure you have a cohesive data strategy. All right. So other considerations for leaders. What do we have to do? We have to invest in the training, not just tools. Okay. We have to make sure that people are knowledgeable, that they are AI fluent. And by the way, we're not just talking about the doers, the workers. They probably are AI fluent. In fact, they've probably been experimenting with AI before you as leaders even knew it. They were messing around with different things even before then. So the fluency is also for the leaders as well. Yes, I'm using a Deanism here, right? So Dean Leffenwell would often say, how do you lead what you don't know? How do you make decisions about things you don't understand? Gain the knowledge. You can't lead in this new age without the knowledge. Empower your AI champions. Find those people who have the knowledge within your organizations. Those people who are passionate about it. Those people who are studying it. Those people who are really working hard at their passion, right? Rewire the organization, okay? Not coincidentally, there's a book, I think it's Gene Kim, right? Rewiring the Organization. We're in a new phase here, folks. This is going to be not only a technological change, but a culture change as well. There are lots of things in motion, a lot of plates spinning in the air. And this is going to require, much like it did with Agile, it's also going to require a culture change as well to make AI useful. All right. Set bold goals and execute. Notice I didn't say set risky goals and hope. That's not what this is about. Your strategy must govern this. Your strategy. So we cannot be misaligned and we can't be doing this without strategy alignment. All right. So yeah, it's good to be bold. But make sure you're taking the right risks in the right areas. Strategic considerations for leaders, there's many. Okay. But think about this, and I'm not going to go through this point by point. The slide's a little busy, but I'll say it in these words. When you start looking at, maybe developing your own framework, but when you start looking at investing into AI, you got a lot of questions that you need to answer, especially where strategy is concerned. Build or buy? I don't know. Do you have the people? Do you have those folks available? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So are you going to be able to continue to work on those things? Or do you need to outsource it? And if you outsource it, are you concerned about the data? Okay, well, maybe you are. Maybe you need to bring that in-house. Okay, if you're bringing it in-house, what does that mean? Does that mean some kind of private cloud instance? Does that mean you're going to buy an NVIDIA machine and you're going to drop an open source DeepSeek on it and pray that it doesn't call home? All right. Chinese open source. Do you understand the code? I don't. And I've been coding for years. So, these are complex machines. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just go, you know what? We're not dealing with LLMs. That's commodity. We're going to use OpenAI or somebody else. Okay. What about the costs involved? So you've taken the energy consideration out of your side of things, but what about the costs involved for you? Understand that these models are still figuring out their own costs, and then they haven't figured out the holy grail as far as that stuff goes. What's the right cost for performance? So there are a lot of these considerations, not the least of which is total cost of ownership and data strategy and privacy, right? So make sure you have a good, strong cybersecurity policy. Make sure that's part of your framework. NIST already has a pretty good framework out there to use. Data strategy. If you don't have a data strategy, even if you're experimenting with AI, you're putting yourself into deep trouble. All right. So one last time, Steve, let's switch it over. I think I got the last. Yeah. One last time, let's switch it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to go to this very quickly so we have time for Q&A. Look, there's always been technology risks since the advent of the computer. AI introduced some that we're familiar with. We know about privacy and security and reliability and accuracy. It just takes on another dimension given the inherent nature of the way AI works. So, it became clear, once AI burst into the global consciousness in November of 22, that as organizations began trying to adopt and apply this technology in their business operations, they've run into some real risks. And if you track the news feeds on the developments in AI on a daily basis, it's about a week occurrence that you're going to get some story in that news feed about some AI capability in an organization going sideways and doing something that they didn't think it was supposed to do, or creating a vulnerability. And so this idea of how do we build responsible AI is a term that's kind of being adopted. We early on did some deep research into this to figure out, is there a model that everybody's gravitating to, whether it's NIST, whether it's from the tech giants, the consulting houses, the research, academia. They all say something about it, but nobody has gravitated to a unified model for how we understand how to adopt AI responsibly and safely. So we tried to build a synthesis of all the sources that represents all the various topics that appear across multiple models. And the image you see on the screen is what we came up with. Something just to make it easy to remember: trustworthy, explainable, and human-centric, and what that means underneath it. I'll just point you to our article on the SAFE Framework site that goes into that more deeply and explains every one of those and what that means and what organizations have to do to make sure their AI has these attributes. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. So what might be in a framework, a governance policy, a model for your organization that makes sure you're using AI responsibly? I gave you 14 things on the previous slide. You can kind of think of them in these buckets as well. So basic usage. You need to let your organization, your employees know what can you use, what can you not use? Can you put anything in there? Are there certain types of things that you can't put in there? People need to know. Otherwise, they're going to do one of two things. You're not going to use it at all, which means you're not going to get the value, or they're going to use it in ways you don't want them to use it, and then you got to deal with the fallout of that. Right. So make sure there's very clear guidance for people to follow. Privacy and security. That's typically in your IT shop. You got to build systems in place. Whether it's to keep the bad guys out or to keep the good stuff from the inside from leaking out. A lot of that's a technology-based set of systems you got to put into place. Ethics and bias, that's a review mechanism, a human in the loop we have in our own AI product. People that every single week are looking at how it's behaving, what answers is it giving, is it hallucinating, is there bad data? That's that operational footprint that I described earlier, that it's what you agree to do when you're going to operationalize AI technology. It has to have oversight. It has to have management and caretaking, and you got to know that, and you got to put the systems and the people in place to do that. And then accountability for how the AI behaves. There's not a lot of case law in the legal system on AI yet, but what precedent has started to emerge is made clear. Organizations that adopt AI are responsible for how the AI behaves, whether they understand how it did it or not. So you've got to have, you got to step up as an organization and say, we're going to put the things in place to take ownership for what our AI does and do that in a responsible and compliant way, especially if we're in regulated industries. Okay, next slide. And you got to embed it everywhere. That's the simple answer here. The teams have to have tools in their toolbox to make sure if they're building AI, they build compliance in, not bolt compliance in at the end. So fortunately, there are an avalanche of tools that you can bake right into your CI/CD pipeline to check for bias and all kinds of different things. So make sure you understand that. Guardrails for portfolio decisions on how your AI capabilities are being managed and governed, right? So your portfolio leadership can play a critical role in making sure that the teams that are building AI capabilities are following those guidelines. Again, the proper governance, build it into your OKRs, build it into your KPIs, your guardrails, and just make sure responsible AI it's kind of like security. We've all been through annual security training where we said security is everybody's job. Same thing with responsible AI. Everybody's got to understand what the guardrails are. See something, say something. If something's not being is behaving in a way it's not supposed to, you got to escalate that so the organization can manage it. Next slide.
Okay, I think it's me again, Steve.
Yep.
So let's get to the brass tacks. AI readiness, assess the value first. Are you ready? Do you have a data strategy? How is your cybersecurity? Is there a framework? Have you drafted your own? Do you have a governance framework? What is governing your decision-making in this? Form an AI center of excellence. We said identify that talent and identify those people who have a deep passion around this as well as knowledge, and form that center of excellence. And launch MVPs. I'm differentiating that from experimentation. MVPs are a little more disciplined, as we know. So when we talk about flowing of ideas from strategy to MVP, there's a hypothesis that's formed. It's prioritized against every activity. While you're experimenting with AI, you can't shut down the entire organization and stop shipping products and services. That's not going to work. So you need to make sure that this is integrated in, but it's still using your strategy, your priorities, and your ROI considerations, right? Along with that MVP, you're going to gain knowledge. That's just going to happen. That's going to be an outcome. And as we say here, we like outcomes, not output. So make sure that that knowledge is actually being shared and prioritized accordingly. Got to educate. So got to get trained, got to understand. This goes for leaders as well as the doers themselves. The doers are probably already educating themselves or they've applied to get trained in certain areas. We want to solve real business problems here. What problem are you trying to solve? And as you go at that, don't try to boil the ocean, as the trite expression. Start with small feedback loops, very small, pithy or focused experiments with some guardrails around them, like we talked about. So get fluent, gain the knowledge, make sure your strategy is asking the right questions, maybe create a canvas around with that. We have some ideas there. Reminder, there's a one-pager that you can download that has some of this information on there. I pinned it to the chat. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, take a look at it. It's free for you for this session. Create a roadmap, figure out how. So we're going to take that vision and we're going to turn it into implementation that aligns with your strategy. Okay, before we get to the QA, just some house cleaning here. How can we help as Outcomes 360? If you're on the safe side and you're an SPC, we have advanced AI courses for that, alignment workshops, readiness training, assessments. You can look at our webpage and see if there's any courses that are interesting to you. So it's just outcomes360.com. And you can look at the courses and calendar sublist, and we're announcing a brand new course. So we have a new AI strategy leader course. From this webinar, you can kind of get some of the ideas of topics that we're discussing. So it's kind of this and more. And with that, Let's open up for questions. And the last 5-6 minutes we've got.
We only have a few minutes left, but this is open forum. I encourage everybody that has a question to come off mute or camera, and let's hear from you.
Yep, there's 29 people left.
If I may ask, if I
Yeah.
may jump in straight away, it's Grant here from Valcon. I thank you very much for the presentation. I think it really lands solidly. My question to yourself is, what are some of the case studies where the implementation has gone sort of south? And what I mean by that is that we very much get clients coming to us saying we want to implement AI, and our first question to them is, what does your data look like? So pretty much aligned to what you're saying. But do you have any other case studies of where it hasn't gone as to plan per se?
Lots of them. Unfortunately, when you're doing this kind of research for a doctorate, you come and you're not only interested in those that prove your hypothesis, right? You're also interested in those because your committee is going to tear that apart. So you gotta include both sides of the equation. So yeah, and I'll tell you, where it hasn't gone well, Grant, you need to define that a little bit and say, well, what do we mean by it hasn't gone well? Do you mean we didn't reach the outcome that we projected? That's one way to look at it. The second thing to look at is we said it failed because we didn't get the value out of it that we thought we were going to get. So we didn't make the ROI, or it didn't result in less people, more automation than the ways we thought. So we go right back to, you could blame it on data, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But you could certainly go back and say, I bet you 9 times out of 10, and Steve's research probably confirms this, but I'll let him answer. 9 times out of 10, you could probably say it was a failure because it didn't really match the strategy. And by the way, we didn't define it well enough up front so that we know what kind of outcomes we were looking for. The biggest advice, I see people vibe code all the time, and they'll vibe code an app, right? And I'll go, what the hell is that? And they go, well, it's supposed to do this, it's supposed to do that. If you could just narrow that focus to one thing, like the voice agents for customer service, if you just narrow that focus to this one thing and not try to build the one agent to rule them all, you've got a much higher chance of success. Does that make sense, Grant?
Sure, absolutely.
Steve, I don't know if you want to add anything to that within the last. Oh, we still got 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's right on. I would just say, if you look at what is promoted about, good things to do to be successful in this presentation, a lot of those are the antithesis of built as a result of the failure patterns, right? So not aligning your AI investment to strategy, not understanding the state of your data, right? So a lot of those things are the failure patterns that resulted in AI misbehaving or AI just not delivering on the promise, right? Because of those missteps. So.
Okay, got a question. Thank you for that, Grant. Got a question from Larkin Brown. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Larkin.
Yes. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you. And Joe, it's good to see you and Steve again. You guys attended the training the last time you did the responsible AI training. So good to connect. I think this was a great presentation. Thank you for doing that. And I wanted to post something in the chat. Just wanted your blessings first, but a lot of what you were saying here, really resonated around the portfolio level. Defining the themes, driving alignment, managing risks, etc. And I wrote an article out there published on LinkedIn around April of this year, really driving to that point, because from my personal experience, I've been in an organization that has moved ahead with their journey towards really having a successful implementation, but where they got bogged down was that each department was doing things individually, right? And when you look at like a security or data or something, you had to have that coordination. In addition, we had a lot of redundant systems, right? So, we needed to start moving stuff to the cloud, and that was going to take 2-3 years. So again, I just think that a consideration is orchestrating everything at that portfolio level, and I think this is where LPM could play a huge goal. So I'm going to publish a link to the article I wrote, and as I say, this is a great presentation, and I'm hoping that the LPM aspect of it may be seen as a tool, to contribute to the toolbox along with everything else that has been discussed here, if you don't mind.
Yes, I also posted one that I wrote a little while back, a blog post that got reposted on LinkedIn about financing AI initiatives and maybe how you can expect to get a better ROI out of that.
Yep.
So yes, John Williams, thank you for the reminder. It is 11 o'clock. Thank you,
Maybe-
everyone.
It is time. Thank
Yep.
you, Joe. Thank you, Steve. Let's keep the conversation going. This is an emerging topic, and see you on the next webinar. Those that have attended will get a recording. Thank you.
Live long and prosper.
Thanks. Have a great one.